Chapter 46. Her feet sank into the muddied ground of the pumpkin patch. Mist swirled around her, clinging to her skin. The patch felt like a place that had never known light or warmth. She wished she'd kept Hatta's coat, wished she hadn't let her emotions carry her away, even if he had been insufferable at the time. To her left, she could see the enormous pumpkin with its carved bar windows. Marianne's cries had quieted, but Kath could still hear her sobs carrying over the otherwise silent patch. To her right was the cottage, this time without the smell of wood smoke and the welcoming light behind the windows. It seemed deserted. She could no longer see Peter in the distance. Picking up her skirts, Catherine trampled through the overgrown vines, hurrying toward the pumpkin where Marianne was being kept prisoner, casting terrified glances over her shoulder at every noise. The shrieking wind, the rustle of leaves, the squish and slurp of her nicest boots pulling from the mud. The sister's refrain haunted her thoughts. Peter, Peter, pumpkin eater, had a pet and couldn't feed her. Got a maid who had meant well. What became of her? No one can tell. She tripped suddenly and fell, sprawling into a mud puddle. Her hands sank to her wrists, filth coating the front of her dress. Kath sat panting for a moment, feeling the hectic thrum of blood in her veins. Her teeth chattered. Pushing back onto her knees, she glanced around again and tried to catch her breath. Still, no sign of Peter. Then her eyes took in the uneven ground that had caused her to trip. Catherine scurried backward, hoping her eyes were mistaken. But no, it was a footprint planted into the mud, the edges dried and cracked. It could have been days old, or weeks, undisturbed until Kath had tumbled into it. A 3-clawed footprint was pressed into the mud. The puncture of talons dug deep holes into the ground. Pumpkins and vines had been crushed beneath the weight of some enormous creature. Heart galloping, Kath scrambled to her feet and wiped her hands as well as she could on her ruined gown. Marianne's cries had dwindled to sniffs and wavering gasps. Kath lifted her skirt and ran the rest of the way. "Marianne," she whispered, throwing herself at the window with its pumpkin flesh slats. "Marianne, it's me." The sniffling quieted, and Marianne appeared at the window, her eyes bloodshot. "Kath? Are you all right?" Marianne pushed her hand through the bars, reaching for her. "It's Peter. He put me in here and he has..." Her voice broke. "The Jabberwock." Jabberwock. Somehow, Kath had already known it. The beastly footprint. Peter's determination to have the Wurple sword from her. The tiny wooden horse from the lion's hat. Peter, Peter, pumpkin eater. Kath shook her head to clear it off the haunting melody. "How do I get you out of here?" "There's a door in the roof that opens," said Marianne, pointing up. Kath stepped back and paced around the pumpkin until she saw it. The jagged saw cut that made a small square opening beside the pumpkin's prickly stem. "Kath," said Marianne, as Kath started looking around for some way to get up to the door. A ladder. She needed a ladder, or a saw to cut off the window's bars so Marianne could climb through. "What is it?" she said, pressing her hand against the pumpkin's outer flesh. The wall must have been nearly a foot thick, but if she had a blade that was sharp enough... "It's his wife!" She met Marianne's gaze through the window. "What?" "The Jabberwock. It's Lady Peter. I saw her going into the powder room at the theatre, looking like she was going to be ill, and then the beast came out." Kath frowned, thinking of the sickly woman who had been so very desperate for more pumpkin cake. "Are you sure?" Marianne nodded, her expression taut. "There was no one else in the powder room. I'm sure of it. And also, the pumpkins." Kath shuddered. "The pumpkins," she breathed. Lady Peter had won a pumpkin-eating contest, and at the theatre, she'd been so desperate for the cake that Kath had made, the cake that... She swallowed hard. "They changed the turtle too," Marianne whimpered, guilt mingling with her distress. "We shouldn't have stolen that pumpkin. It's our fault. I came here hoping to find a cure or some evidence that could take back to the king. Woman or Jabberwock, she has to be stopped." "You came here alone?" Kath said. "What were you thinking?" Marianne's blue eyes began to fill with tears. "I know, it isn't logical at all, but I thought maybe I would be a hero. I believed I could stop the Jabberwock. Me! Then I could ask the king for a favor, and I thought I could get him to pardon your joker. Then maybe you would forgive me." Her voice dissolved into renewed sobs. "But Peter called me, and now he means to feed me to her, Kath. He's going to kill me." "Oh, Marianne." Her gaze flitted up to the soiled bonnet on Marianne's head. Hatta's bonnet, the one that turned logic into dreams. Resentment shot through her, mixing with the fear and the panic and the need to get both of them away from her as quickly as possible. "I forgive you, I do. But you need to be calm now. Take off that bonnet and try to be sensible, if you can. We need to find a way to get you out of there." Marianne untied the bonnet and tore it off her head. Kath gave the bars one good shake, but if Marianne couldn't pull them open, she had no chance. "I need a ladder or something that can cut through these bars." Sniffing, Marianne pointed toward the far corner of the pumpkin patch. "There was a shed on the other side of the cottage. There might be something there." "Right, I'll be back. Be careful," Marianne cried as Kath turned away and started picking her way toward the darkened cottage. Her skin was covered in goosebumps, her gown made heavy by the drying mud. Her gaze searched the patch in desperation, looking for any sign that Peter or the Jabberwock might be near. A whisper drifted past her ears, and she froze. Her pulse drummed as she turned in a full circle, searching. The whisper came again, and this time she was ready for it. The familiar poem turned her organs to ice. "Peter, Peter, pumpkin eater," she forced down a gulp. "Had a wife but couldn't keep her." She spun around again, her legs trembling. She wished she'd taken Jess's scepter or Hatta's cane, anything to use as a weapon. "He put her in a pumpkin shell, and there he kept her very well." She turned again and spotted the destroyed shell of one of the enormous, house-sized pumpkins. It was the one she and Marianne had seen before, the one they'd heard the strange scratching from. Now the shell lay in gigantic pieces scattered across the pumpkin patch, as if some beast had destroyed it from the inside. Some beast, like the Jabberwock. Kath pushed ahead, The sooner she got Marianne out of here, the sooner she could return to Gest and begin her new life far away from the Kingdom of Hearts.
"He'll take you too,"
Kath yelled. The voices were louder now, right at her feet. She jumped back and looked down at a knee-high pumpkin that sat off the path. As she stared, its flesh peeled back, revealing 2 triangle eyes and a gap-toothed mouth.
"Run away,"
the pumpkin told her, still whispering, as the carved pupils of its eyes slid from side to side.
"Run away. Run away before he finds you,"
warned another jack-o'-lantern 2 rows over.
You're alive,"
she stammered.
"He'll kill you,"
said the first pumpkin,
"to feed the insatiable Jabberwock. He killed our brothers, blaming us for what became of her. It wasn't our fault. It wasn't our fault. It was those other pumpkins, those cruel pumpkins. The ones that came from the looking glass. They are to blame, but we'll all suffer for it. You should run away. Run away with your human legs. Run away."
Kath hurried on, as much to get away from their nerve-tingling words as to heed their warnings. She thought of the jack-o'-lanterns spiked on the wrought iron fence, and bile rose in her throat. She choked it back down as she rounded the corner of the cottage. No ladder, no saw, no axe. But there was a woodshed, not much further, the door ajar and black shadows spilling out. She lifted her skirts and jogged toward it, her eyes beginning to water with the suffocating presence of fear. Something grabbed her and slammed her back against the cottage wall so hard the wind kicked out of her lungs. A scream died in her throat. Peter hunched over her, eyes ablaze and a gleaming axe in his hand.